we need to learn about this because this happened. And there's a lot of scientific work on this, like Victor Kluve and Bill Napier. And right now there's Richard Firestone, Alan West, and Simon Warwick Smith, who wrote the book, The Cycle of Cosmic Catastrophes, about this event. There's a lot of science being done that validates everything the seas have said about these events. You know, and of course these guys, you know, they don't want to know that some so-called channel source, you know, me in the future called the Casiopeos, you know, talked about what they are proving scientifically.
Right.
But, you know, there it is.
Well, actually, that's an interesting question, you know, to think about, which is whether or not your husband, and how do you say Arcady? Is that how you say his name?
Just call him Ark.
Ark, okay. So
I found the Ark.
I hear you. How Ark, I mean, he would deal with the science end of things.
He's working on this. He's working on a lot of the things, a lot of clues that the seas have given, you know, mathematical clues about modeling dimensions and densities and gravity and those sorts of things. And he's making excellent progress. I don't want to talk about that too much, but he's making some really good progress with that. We do have, and I'll say, you know, science has been taken over by pathology too. There are many good scientists who are interested in these topics, who are interested in the paranormal, who are interested in what we're doing. And believe it or not, we get together with them and talk about the seas. I get emails from people across the world who are doing, you know, real scientific research, and they ask me, well, what do the seas think about this? And I give them, you know, of course, I would never bring their names out in public. I would not embarrass, I would not cause them problems with their institution. Come on, when Brian Josephson started, you know, a Nobel Prize winner, started talking about the paranormal and some of his life, you know, the rumors started immediately, propagated like wildfire in the scientific community that he was having a nervous breakdown and he needed, you know, a long rest. This is what happens because in science, they do not and cannot allow consciousness that exists outside the body to be demonstrated as a demonstrable fact. I don't say that we're ever going to prove it in any satisfactory material way, a non-material phenomenon, but we can demonstrate that that's the way it is. I mean, if you're sitting there on the side of the road and, you know, people keep walking by you on the road and they say around the bend there, they just crossed a bridge over a river and you know, for some reason you can't get up and walk and go around the bend, but 500 people have passed by and some of them even said, I stopped and got my feet wet. And you see them with wet feet. Or I fell off the bridge into the river and they're soaking wet. And all these people are walking by you telling you about this river and this bridge. You know, that's pretty, you know, convincing that that bridge actually exists and that river actually is there. And maybe you can even hear the rushing water. And maybe you can hear steamboats or, you know, people splashing in the water. You can't see it with your eyes. You haven't put your foot in it yourself. But it's convincing. That's how the paranormal is. That's how paranormal events are.
Absolutely. And that's actually what we're doing here today. We are talking to a witness of these events, okay, of this information. And actually that's our portal into the unknown, are the people. We were actually portals in essence, bringing back information about what cannot be seen in this reality, this 3D materialistic reality. And so we've got to move beyond it, and we've got to use the eyes that we have, you know, and the senses that we have, and we certainly have more than the traditional number of, what is it they say you have, 5 senses? I don't even know. I'm so used to so many more being part of my understanding.
Part of the problem there is that paranormal phenomena are like macrocosmic quantum phenomena. In the quantum world, you can observe momentum or position, never both at once. I mean, once you've observed momentum, you've changed position and vice versa. So, you know, the materialists, and I think that there should be some kind of testing process to determine if an individual has a soul or not before they're allowed to become a scientist. I'm sorry, but, you know, I think that people without a soul who also don't have a conscience, you know, should not be in positions of authority in any sphere of activity. But they say, oh, you've got to prove, you know, you've got to be repeatable. Well, you know, how repeatable is it observing the same atom in the same momentum or position over and over again in a laboratory? It's absolutely, utterly, you know, even theoretically impossible. Yet they want to impose that demand on paranormal phenomena that are non-physical, that are basically macrocosmically quantum. So, and they say, and Carl Sagan, well, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. Well, come on, if this were a murder trial in a court of law, there would have already been a hanging. I mean, hundreds of years ago. How did we go so wrong? Because pathologicals took over our government, took over our religion, took over our society, took over our education. They completely removed spirit, consciousness, soul from the entire equation. We live in a postmodernist, rational world where being human means to be a machine.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And even if I'm scientific and I want evidence, but I want evidence that gives me probabilities because I understand my phenomena and I have experienced it. And let me tell you a funny little story before we close here. There was a linguist who got in touch with me, and he was interested in my book Secret History because I get into some linguistics in there. And he picked it up at a 40 Times, one of their conventions. And 40 Times is another one of those things. It's really gone off the track because, Charles Fort, he said, I think we're property. He got into Fortean phenomena because he knew it was evidence of some other reality. And now, the Fortean Times and the Fortean people spend all their time debunking. They have article after article. They debunk UFOs, they debunk, this, they debunk alien abductions, they debunk, they spend all their time debunking. It's like they've got to be approved and patted on the head by the scientific establishment in order to find their reality, that their reason for being.
Especially materialistically.
Oh boy. He wrote to me because he found my book at this 40 Times convention, or unconvention. And we had a few little exchanges, and he didn't like a certain book that I had cited as being, a very interesting read, which is Where Troy Once Stood by a fellow named Iman Wilkins. Great book. And I think that what he's proposing in there, while it may not be exact as to timing, and it may not be exact as to every single detail, but I think that what he's proposing is basically a very valid hypothesis that Troy did not exist in the Mediterranean, that Troy existed in the area, in an area in England, and that all of these difficulties that scholars have had for years of trying to figure out, what Homer was talking about with his wine dark sea and these weird sailing directions and these weird places, was because all of these things took place in a different place, a different time. And, of course, the archaeology does not bear out Troy in the Mediterranean. If there is a Troy, then it was certainly, not as described by Homer. So we were talking about Iman Wilkins' book. Highly recommend it if you can get a copy. And Iman, I know I don't get any kickbacks. But we went back and forth, and I explained to him, that the main thesis of the book is to talk about this underlying hyperdimensional reality that is behind our history and how it, extrudes itself into the historical timeline, and how you can observe these long historical events and see the movement of that hyperdimensional energy through, the actions of human beings, through historical cycles, through the behavior of groups of people, through manipulations, things emerge, And so he came back, well, he'd never experienced anything, and blah, 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 and I was talking about something that, couldn't prove. And I realized, I could get into a whole long debate with this guy, and I could cite all of this, if you really want to be up, it's there. Go to a library, look it up in the card catalog, read the books. If you haven't read the books, don't talk to me. It's like the guy who was, putting down Rupert Sheldrake, who hadn't even read his book.
Sure.
Don't do it. So I said, I'm not going to get into this argument. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to give this guy my energy. So I just wrote him back, and I told him what I said a while ago. that I realized after a long period of observation, there were two basic kinds of people on the planet. People who believed in souls and people who didn't.
Okay.
And I explained to him that, we have all been programmed with this, Judeo-Christian thing about all have souls. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God, or whatever. And it permeates everything. It permeates even science. A scientist cannot grow up in our society and do science without having it influenced by this Judeo-Christian worldview. It pollutes everything we think, do, and say. So I said this to him, and he wrote back, well, it doesn't, I mentioned religion, And I wrote back, and I pointed out, because he talked to me about etymology. I just think about the fact that you were criticizing these etymologies, which is, finding out word roots. And I said, where do you get your etymologies? Well, Hebrew, Greek. I said, okay, and if you read the Bible and you understand where these etymologies come from, you understand that they made shit up, to explain the origins of words, according to the way they wanted it to be made up. I said, so the whole foundation of your science is based on something that's made up and can't be trusted. So I said, so the whole problem is that there are two kinds of people. Those who have souls and who have the experiences that I have had. I cannot convey to you my experiences. If you haven't had them, you haven't had them. And there's no way that I can convey it to you. There's 10,000 people can tell you that they have them. But if you don't have them and have never had them, you can't know what they're talking about. It's like somebody talking about the color blue and green and the differences to somebody who's blue-green colorblind. Okay, you don't have a soul. You don't see those colors. You'll never see it. You can't understand it. So there's these kinds of people. So I told him, I said, you're probably one of those who doesn't have it. So for you, it's true. You have never had those experiences. You will never have those experiences. Many people have them. I have had them. Many other people have had them. For us, it's real. For you, it isn't. Because there's two kinds of people. Those who have souls and those who don't. Well, let me tell you what. This member of the Skeptic Society, this totally scientific, postmodernist, rationalist, linguist, who wanted to shoot, who bought my book, no doubt, so that he could criticize it, wrote back and, how dare I suggest that he didn't have a soul? The thing that he denied existed, he now wanted to have.
Exactly.
Isn't that amazing?
Well, it actually makes sense. The trouble is with this, the pathological individuals, whatever you want to call, the ones that are basically service to self, and the ones that do not have souls, the ones that are service to self and don't have souls, because there are service to self that do have souls,
right,
and are working through an evolution of going back to who they once were. But in essence, those beings are also claiming to have souls, because they want to fit in, and so they are some of the most rabid, fundamentalists and whatever, because they are actually almost mimicking what they think a being with a soul would be.
Well, I mean,
so you really get into a huge, it is a hall of mirrors and out there. And so discernment is absolutely, in other words, if you have a soul, it's not something that you can, again, how do you prove it?
How do you prove it?
You
can't prove it.
That's actually the nature.
It's like the river
of what we're
around the
talking
bend.
about.
You can hear intimations of it. You can see some bits of evidence that keep coming around. The people telling you the story, and people have their feet wet or their clothes wet.
Yeah, is it? And then they're all different, because there's so many disguises that we're talking about that beings and humans, so-called humans, wear, and so on. So we're talking about some people think that because a person behaves in a certain way, that means they're a good person and they have a soul.
No, remember
and
that
actually it's the ones...
Evil insinuates itself by appearing to be good. Human beings have an intraspecies predator that mimics them and mimics Think about the guy down in Australia that was found out for being, a complete fraud, a complete psychopath,